Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to talk about English conversations. Have you ever felt that small cultural differences can make talking to people a little difficult? Don't worry, a lot of people feel that way. Understanding these little details is super important for having great conversations. So, let's get started.
So, have you ever been in an English conversation and felt that something was just a little strange? Maybe it was confusing, and you weren't sure why. Well, many learners feel this way. Let's look at a few common situations to help you feel more comfortable and confident. First up, let's talk about the very beginning of any conversation, greetings. You know, how you say hello in English can be pretty different from how you do it in Japanese, and it's not always about the time of day. Okay, so here's a big difference. In Japan, your greeting often depends on the time of day, right? You say ohayo only in the morning. But in English, it's more about your relationship with a person. For example, you can say hi to a good friend anytime, morning, afternoon, or night. If you say good evening to a friend, it might sound a little too serious. So the main thing to remember is think about who you're talking to, not just what time it is.
All right, let's move on to a really common phrase. It can be a little confusing for many Japanese speakers. It's a question you hear all the time. How are you? So in Japanese, when someone asks, "O genki desu ka?" it's usually a real question. You might stop and think about how you're actually feeling. But in English, "how are you" is often not a real question. It's more like a second hello. It's just a friendly way to start a conversation. A simple, short reply like, "Good, thanks, how about you?" is almost always the perfect answer. You don't need to give a lot of details. This is a really important little rule of everyday English conversation. If you can remember that "how are you" is just a friendly, automatic phrase, a way to start talking, your conversations will feel a lot easier. Next, let's talk about names. What you call someone is really important, and the rules for using first names and family names are very different in Japan and in English-speaking countries. In Japan, using a person's family name with san is a sign of respect. But in many English-speaking places, people usually start using first names very quickly. It's a way to be friendly. So if someone introduces themselves as Sarah, it's totally fine to call her Sarah. Actually, if you keep calling a coworker Mrs. Brown for a long time, she might think you're not very friendly. Using first names just helps the conversation feel more relaxed. Okay, let's look at another important skill, how to say no when someone invites you to do something. It can be a tough situation because you want to be polite, but you also need to be clear. Generally, English speakers like clear and direct answers. If you're not direct, it can sometimes be confusing. A simple and polite way to say no is to first say something like, "Thank you for asking," or "I'm sorry." Then, just say clearly that you can't go. For example, "I'm sorry, but I can't come to the party." It's polite and it's also very clear. People will understand. And for our last point, let's talk about something you don't say. Silence. How people feel about quiet moments in a conversation can be very, very different in different cultures. In a Japanese conversation, a little bit of silence can feel normal, right? It can mean you are thinking carefully about your answer. But in many English conversations, a long silence can feel, well, uncomfortable. The other person might start to worry that something is wrong or that you aren't interested in the conversation. So, to avoid that uncomfortable, quiet time, native English speakers often use small words to fill the space while they think. We call these fillers. Words like well, or you know, don't really add any information. They just send a signal to the other person that says, "Wait a second, I'm thinking and I'm going to say more." Using these little words yourself can actually make your English sound more natural. We've talked about a lot today, from greetings to how we use silence. All of these are small things, but practicing them can make a really big difference in how confident you feel. So I have one last question for you. Which one of these tips are you going to try in your next English conversation? Even just thinking about it is a great start. Thanks for watching.